It is not that often that I have obviously underbid a job in my time as a contractor. But on this job, I definitely underbid and began realizing it pretty quickly. The first sign was the customer telling me as we were getting going on the project that he would have paid twice the price of my bid to have me do the work. Now let me qualify that a little bit by saying that this customer had a very negative experience with a contractor on a prior bathroom remodel that I had also bid and did not get the job due to scheduling issues. So he was a little gun shy and had no intention of giving the work to anyone else but me this go round. So how did I foul up my bid so badly? It's really not that complicated. Building a small bar area encompassed about a 4x4 by 8 foot space in the customer's home. How can you possibly underbid a project that's only happening in about 16 square feet of floor space? One oversight I made was that I gave the customer a price range between $2,500 and $5,000, depending on how elaborate we went with the finishes, which I don't think I've ever done before in quite this way. $2,500 amount was for very basic and simple finishes, to which the customer said, "Great, $2,500 sounds wonderful." But the finishes are ultimately a minor part of the job. The bulk of the work is in the number of trades that are involved in the process of the remodel, which have to be done regardless of how elaborate or simple the finishes may be. I overlook this at times because I enjoy doing all the trades, but each one takes time and requires certain tools and skills. Switching back and forth between the trades extends the time it takes to complete the job. I know that may not sound like it could be a problem, but trust me, it has an impact. All in all, it turned out great, though. I certainly didn't lose money because the supplies were minimal. In fact, most everything I already had in inventory in my shop. I just had a lot more hours in this job than I intended, which incidentally is not an unusual thing. Jobs seem to always take longer than I think. One of the obvious things about this project is that the work area is located right in the center of the house. The design is such that all traffic of the people living there went through the area we were working in, so we tried to drape it off with plastic to help keep dust from covering everything in the house. The floor-to-ceiling wall section is about 36 inches wide and is essentially an extension of the hallway wall. Just a quick word about framing this wall. Sometimes the easiest way to build a wall like this is to stick frame it in place. By that I mean we cut the bottom and top wall plates and simultaneously cut the end studs to fit the exact length that we need to get the wall to fit tightly between the floor and the ceiling. I glue the bottom plate to the floor and also run fasteners into the concrete. And at the ceiling, I screw the top plate to whatever roof structure I can find through the sheetrock. And in this case, we also inserted toggle bolts in the top plate to further assure that the framing is going to be solid and not move on us. By the way, all connections of the wood pieces are made with 2.5-inch assembly screws instead of nails on most of my smaller remodels. It takes a little bit longer, but I like the results. To take care of the electrical needs, I tapped into a nearby plug. We needed a new plug for the wine cooler and refrigerator unit and added one more receptacle above the countertop just in case there was ever a need there. Finally, we installed a light over the new bar to provide some accent lighting, which was a nice touch. With the structural work done and electrical wiring in place, we were ready to close everything back up again with sheetrock and start moving ahead to finishes and getting this job complete. About at this time, I was getting a little antsy knowing I still had quite a bit of work to do. Taping and floating out all of the joints and corners of the sheetrock is another one of those jobs that's not particularly difficult, but it is something that you learn to do over time with practice and experience. The joint compound, or mud as I typically refer to it, is a very versatile product that allows you to get very smooth surfaces and clean corners and outer edges as you get better at applying it. The new walls here have to have an orange peel texture applied to them to match the other walls in the house. A small area of ceiling over the bar will need to have a brocade type pattern texture applied to it. You may be more familiar with the cans of texture that can be purchased from the big box or paint stores than this contraption called a hopper that I'm going to spray the orange peel texture with. The hopper is attached to an air hose and compressor sitting out in the back of my truck in the driveway with a pressure gauge set at about 35 to 40 pounds. To do this with the pressurized cans of texture would be a nightmare. It wouldn't match as well as the spray from the hopper. The cans are really quite expensive at about $20 each the last time I checked, and I'm guessing I would need to get quite a few of the large size canisters to do this job. So it's pretty rare that I don't use my hopper when I need to spray texture. It takes more time to set up and mask off the spray area than it actually does to spray. But again, this is one of those trades that takes time over a couple of days, even though it's a small working area. Multiple coats of mud need to be applied and then allowed to dry before the next step. A little history on my hopper. I bought this almost 40 years ago, and as you can see, this was before the days of barcodes, so a black permanent marker did the job of marking the price. I paid $95 for it back in the early 80s. That was a lot of money back then for sure, but I think I've gotten my money's worth out of it, and it still works like it did the first time I ever used it. I haven't priced small hoppers like this recently, but my guess is you can probably get one cheaper now than I did 40 years ago. The technique for applying the brocade pattern on the ceiling is another one of those skills you learn over time. I'm stamping the ceiling with a tool called a hawk, where I randomly spread mud on the surface of it and apply it lightly to the ceiling, like a stamping pattern. I then take the blade and knock down the mud to get the same kind of distribution and pattern that's on the ceiling area around this spot. The secret I have found to getting a good match is to apply less material than you think you will need. If you overdo it and the area of the ceiling looks heavy, it stands out like a sore thumb. It's easier to build up lighter applications until you think you're getting close, then stop before you do too much. In this case, less is always better. After letting the new texture dry overnight, the area can be lightly sanded with a sanding block to knock off any rough spots and then painted. I still have floating shelves, cabinetry, and countertop to install, but after paint, most of the remaining work is completed in the shop, and I only show up on the job to do pretty quick installations. Floating shelves are very popular these days, and I've done a lot of work with them for customers over the last few years. One method for installing solid floating shelves that I use is to thread 5/8 inch all-thread rods into the studs in the wall and then slide the shelves over the rods. I'm linking a video in the corner where I show an approach for doing this. In that video, I use a handle we built to spin the rods into the wall that works very well. In this installation, at least one rod is too close to the wall to be able to use the handle, so I use a set of channel locks to accomplish the same purpose. The layout of my studs in this wall was driven by my need to be able to have studs appropriately placed to install the rods in. This is by no means the only way to do it, but I prefer to have the rods go into the full studs rather than any other type of backing. Once the rods are in place, the next step is to build shelves and drill holes in the shelves to allow them to be installed level on the wall. My preferred method is to cut strips of 1 3/4 inch hardwood that, after drilling appropriately placed holes for the rods, I can glue them together to create the slab. That makes a very nice solid shelf. I also install bushings over where the rods go into the shelves in order to place a set screw on each rod that holds it in place. That ultimately may not be necessary, but if it turns out that the shelf is a little loose, the set screw eliminates that problem. Maybe you're getting the sense now that this is turning into an awful lot of work for 16 square feet of floor space, but we still have ways to go. I need to take the shelves back to the shop for some final trimming and then shoot them with finish before they can be permanently installed. In the meantime, the lower cabinetry is pretty straightforward and simple, but certainly custom. Since the little wine cooler takes up a good amount of space, I'm building boxes out of 3/4 inch melamine that I can put a couple of drawers in and one cabinet door. I put in a small box on the base that gives us toe space for the cabinet, and then 2 other weird shaped boxes to take up the rest of the area and create a space for the cooler to sit. Since most of my remaining work is now in the shop, I decided to put in a late night to help me shave off probably half a day tomorrow. When I do this, I have to pull out the big guns for energy. This has been a long tradition for me, and the only thing I was missing was Snickers bars to go along with my Dr. Pepper. So I had to settle for a couple of Crunch bars to help me get through the next few hours and stay alert enough to not hurt myself in the process. Oops, not sure what happened there, but a Band-Aid will keep me from bleeding all over the countertop. Speaking of countertop, I made a template for the bar the day before and was able to make quick work of the solid surface countertop in a few hours. To finish it off, I needed to install some spacer strips on the bottom of it to rest on when it's installed. I got my door parts and drawer fronts prepped and drawers built earlier in the day, and only need to glue up the shaker style door so I could test fit all of this in the morning. I sprayed 3 coats of satin polyacrylic finish over the unstained alder hardwood to get this finish. Here are the rest of the parts of the cabinet and trim work that were used on this project. Since the wine cooler unit sits on the lower cabinet box, it didn't need to be secured. I ran trim around the top and right side of the opening to accent and balance the look a little bit. All that remains now is the final installation of the shelves. There is one more very custom bit of cabinet work needed for me to complete this project, and that is the building of this wine glass rack on the middle shelf. It's very straightforward in that all I did was cut these simple T-track pieces to hold the base of the wine glasses upside down. It should hold 12 glasses with room to spare. I cut a slight chamfer on all the edges of the shelves and molding, which gives everything a nice clean look. Alder is one of those hardwoods like ash and walnut that can pop a bit with only a clear finish over the top of it. That is a good looking little piece there. So yes, I think I underbid this job just a little bit, and looking back on it, just because of all the custom work that was involved, I should have charged more. But I've always looked at situations like this as being my responsibility if I cut myself a little bit short. I've never asked for more money after I bid something unless there was a big change asked for by a customer that I was unaware of. As a result, I've never really hurt myself by underbidding a project. That practice has served me well with customers in that I have pretty much built this remodeling business in the latter part of my career around only working for a select group of customers who bring me back for follow-up projects. And since this is my last official job that I will do for customers outside of my shop, I don't guess I'll change anything. Yep, after the COVID environment of the past year and turning 66 a few months back, I need to set my sights on a few other priorities besides working on other people's homes. YouTube content will be one of those priorities. If you've hung in there till the end, thanks for watching.